Defendant's next witness.
Thank you, Doctor. Your Honor, I've got a videotape that I'd like to play now, and I think I need some assistance from your clerk bailiff to switch it over. But it's a videotape of Deputy Hoffman. I've got a transcript of it if you'd like to follow along, or you just want to watch the video.
I'll watch the video. I assume this is from a prior deposition?
Yes, Your Honor. This is actually a deposition and has been identified by the parties that we were going to play it. And it's the entirety of the deposition transcript.
Sometimes these depositions we've talked about are videotaped, and again, you'll treat this just like you would the testimony of the witness if he were here in court.
Today is Thursday, August 25th, 2011. We're located at the law offices of Glasgow, Taylor, Isham, and Glasgow in Granbury, Texas. Our purpose is to take the oral deposition of Dana Hoffman relative to a case styled Tera M. Bruner-McMahon et al. Versus County of Sedgwick et al. Filed as cause number 101064 KHBGLR in Kansas County.
United States District Court, District of Kansas.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. The time is 9:07 a.m. Counsel, at this time, would you state your individual appearances for the record?
For the Sedgwick County defendants.
Gary Osterman for ConMed defendants.
Alan Glending for Staton County and its officers.
Arthur Chalmers for the Sedgwick County defendants.
Can we, Robert Drew for the plaintiff, Your Honor, approach the bench.
Thank you. Deborah Minton is our certified
Of course you may.
We ready?
Can we put the volume just a little bit if jurors are standing?
Yeah.
So make sure I can that.
Okay.
Members of the jury, why don't we take our morning recess now, and we'll have somebody from the IT department standing by in case they're not able to figure this out. So let's take a 15-minute recess and we'll reconvene at 11 o'clock. Court's in recess.
All rise. Court is now in recess.
deposition. Ms. Minton, would you please swear in the witness?
Raise your right hand to be sworn. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this deposition will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
Would you state your name and residence for the record, please?
Retired Deputy Donna Hoffman, Sedgwick County Sheriff's Department.
And what's your current address? You live in, well, you don't need to know the specifics, but you live in Granbury, Texas, is that right?
That's correct.
You indicate you retired from the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Department. When did you retire?
July 1st, 2009.
And what was your position when you retired?
I was a deputy doing transports for the department.
How long had you had that position?
Approximately.
They were on the phone.
You indicate you retired.
Turn it off.
Today is Thursday, August 25th, 2011. We're located at the law offices of Glasgow, Taylor, Isham, and Glasgow in Granbury, Texas. Our purpose is to take the oral deposition of Dana Hoffman relative to a case styled Tera M. Bruner-McMahon et al. Versus County of Sedgwick et al. File is cause number 101064 KHVGLR in Kansas County. That's what I have here.
United States District Court, District of Kansas.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. The time is 9:07 a.m. Counsel, at this time, would you state your individual appearances for the record?
For the Sedgwick County defendants,
Gary Osterman for ConMed defendants.
Alan Glendale for Staton County and its officers.
Arthur Chalmers for the Sedgwick County defendants.
Robert Giroux for the plaintiff.
Thank you. Deborah Minton is our certified court reporter, providing a
Test, test, test. Hey, Brett, does that sound right, or is that too loud? Okay. You think what? And I'm not going to blast somebody. Is this okay? Not too loud? Okay.
think that I could get.
Celebrated. I'm going to give you the transcript. Do you remember his name? Is it Hoffman? Just whenever it's done, give it back. Am I doing okay? Pardon? Is that what it's about?
All rise. Court is now in session. You may be seated.
please swear in the witness?
Raise your right hand and be sworn. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this deposition will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
Would you state your name and residence for the record, please?
Retired Deputy Donna Hoffman, Sedgwick County Sheriff's Department.
And what's your current address? You live in, well, you don't need to know the specifics, but you live in Granbury, Texas, is that right?
That's correct.
You indicate you retired from the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Department. When did you retire?
July 1st, 2009.
And what was your position when you retired?
I was a deputy doing transports for the department.
How long had you had that position?
Approximately 2 years.
What were the duties of a deputy doing transport?
We were responsible for transporting inmates between Sedgwick County detention facility and other detention facilities throughout the state of Kansas, as well as some local transports for medical purposes and other purposes.
And you would have had that position in March of 2008?
Yes, I would.
Had you held other positions with the county, with the Sheriff's Department more accurately?
Yes, from 1988 to 1997 I worked in the detention facility as a detention deputy, and from 1997 to the time I started working in transport, I was a patrol deputy with Sedgwick County on the second shift.
As a patrol deputy, were you commissioned?
Yes, I was.
What is a commission?
Commission is the authorization of deputies to provide arrest capabilities as well as carry a firearm to carry out our duties.
Is a commissioned deputy something different than a detention deputy?
Yes, a detention deputy is not commissioned. They're basically working in the facilities themselves.
And you retired in 2009, you say? 2009. Was that the first time you retired?
Yes.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood before. And when you retired, is that when you moved down to Texas?
That's correct. Shortly
and
after that.
What brought you to Texas?
I've got family here, and I was raised in Texas, so I kind of wanted to get back to home ground, so to speak.
Okay. Before you are a couple of documents that have been marked, your deposition exhibits 1 and 2. Would you identify those for the record, please?
Well, Exhibit 1 is a trip sheet for March the 6th of 2008. And the other sheet is basically our transport officer's schedule for the month of March of 2008.
What exactly is a trip sheet?
Trip sheet is...
Can I have the date numbers on those?
Sure. The trip sheet is 1402822, and that's Exhibit 1. The Exhibit 2 is 1402823, which is Exhibit 2. Those were the documents, I think, that were emailed to you folks yesterday. And I've lost sight of the question.
The trip sheet...
The stuff that was produced before?
Yes.
He was just describing what the documents were.
Yeah.
It's
okay. What exactly is a trip sheet?
A trip sheet is a sheet that shows the inmates that are be transported out from the Sedgwick County facility to other facilities, as well as the inmates that are to be transported back into the Sedgwick County facility from outlying facilities.
Is that a document that was used in 2008 by the sheriff in connection with transporting inmates to and from the county?
That's correct.
Is that a document that references you in any way?
It has my name as one of the 2 transporting deputies.
And it talks about trips from what, Sedgwick County and back?
That's correct.
What counties are involved in that trip sheet?
This particular their trip sheet, there's inmates going out to Finney County, Meade County, Grant County, and Staton County, and also returning from each of those counties.
Now, Finney County, where's the facility jail in Finney County?
It's Garden City.
And Grant County, where's that?
It's, I believe, Ulysses.
And Stanton County, where's that?
I think it's Johnson City.
Okay. As a deputy that was doing transports during that 2-year period of time, did you frequently make this trip out and back to these counties from Wichita?
This particular set of counties and some others that are out in that area probably made at least twice, maybe 3 times a month.
Okay. And as your duties back when you were a transport deputy, how frequently would you make trips to take inmates from one location or another from Sedgwick County and back?
Probably averaged at least 4 days a week, if not 5.
When you made a trip from Sedgwick County to take inmates to distant counties or to bring them back, what information were you provided to do your job?
Normally we had a trip sheet such as this. If there are any special documents that needed to go with an inmate, which would include like any medical information, medications that they might be taking, that would be sent out as well. We would take their money that they had in their commissary account with them so that they would be able to purchase commissary and whatever personal property they would have.
And when you went to bring them back, what information would you retrieve and bring back with them, if any?
Basically the same thing, with the exception that we didn't normally have any medical information coming back to Sedgwick County. We bring their medications, but that's it.
Let's talk about medical information for a moment. How was that information provided to you and then communicated and passed on to the receiving jails?
Well, normally it would be an envelope with medical information about it, all the inmates. We didn't necessarily look at all of it all the time. On the right side of this trip sheet, it would have their reasons for being transported out and brought back, and if it was something that was medical related, they'd just make a note on their medical, and that was basically the information that we had.
On Exhibit 1, is there a reference as to any of the inmates being transported that the reason for transport was medical?
There was nothing on the trip. From what I'm seeing here, there was nothing on this transport tripping going out that would have anything to do with medical.
Okay.
There was one returning on this sheet that had medical as a transport reason.
And what inmate did that refer to?
Yeah, it was Terry Bruner.
So if you were retrieving Mr. Bruner with the reason for transport being medical, what information would you have been provided about his medical condition, if any?
There would probably have been some kind of sheet that had something on it. I couldn't tell you what it would be necessarily, in an envelope that would go back to the medical team in Sedgwick County.
And this envelope, would it be a sealed envelope that was provided to you and the other transport deputy?
Probably. I don't recall that offhand.
I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but do you have any memory of this trip that is discussed on Exhibit 1?
Not really. We make so many trips with so many different inmates, it's hard to keep track of them.
Now, were there, when you were working for the sheriff as a transport deputy, policies, written policies that concerned the transports of inmates to and from the Wichita facility and these outlying other jails?
Yes.
And the policies did they say anything about the circumstances under which you would or would not transport inmates that had medical issues?
There were policies that for all practical purposes, if an inmate was in such a medical condition that we didn't feel that we were able to take care of that individual, being that we have very minimal medical training, then we had the authority to make the decision as to whether we would transport them or not. Other than security reasons, that's...
Yeah. Stated another way, if you had an inmate that was in a medical circumstance that was viewed as an emergency, is that someone under policy that you could transport on the van back to Wichita or from Wichita to another facility?
If they were...
I'm sorry, sir. I apologize. I object to the form of the question. It's leading and subjective.
You can go ahead and answer if you can.
Would everybody speak up? I think there was an objection, but I couldn't get it.
We'll try.
I hear you fine, Art. I think it's just because there's another. Is Mr. Giroux there?
Yes.
Okay, if he objected, I couldn't hear it. No problem. Just to let you know.
Okay, if we did not feel comfortable in transporting a deputy because of medical conditions that we didn't know for sure whether there would be something that would come up during the trip, then we would have the option of not transporting that individual.
Do you have a memory of ever transporting any inmate either to or from the Sedgwick County facility who had an obvious medical need?
No.
And what I mean by that is anybody who was in some physical state that it was apparent to you that that individual needed to see a health care provider immediately. Do you have any memory of that?
Objection, form, and foundation. Go ahead.
I do not recall anybody that we had that was ill enough that we couldn't transport.
I want to have a mental image of what it looked like to pick up an inmate at Johnson City and to get him in the van for transport back to Wichita. Could you describe that whole process in as much detail as you can?
Okay. Johnson County facility...
Johnson City.
Or Johnson City, I'm
yes.
sorry. Facility was set up that when we picked up and dropped off inmates at that facility, we would pull to the back of the facility. There would be a car, a doorway to kind of like a garage that would open up, and they would have, we'd pull up close to that, we'd have the inmates get off of the van, walk through this garage area, which was probably 15 feet long, through a secured door into an area where the individuals would be processed and held temporarily. This area had a holding cell off to one side, a desk area for the detention deputy at that facility to work from. Would bring the inmates in and basically, once the door was secured, take their shackles and stuff off, and they'd go into a holding cell. When we picked them up, they would generally be in that holding cell. We'd bring them out into the secured area, put their belly chains and leg irons on, collect their property and monies and other things, and load them onto the van. So they would be walking probably about a 15-foot distance from the secured area to the van.
Well, were there instances where inmates would be carried to the van?
Not on any of our trips.
You say they were shackled, or restrained in some fashion. Could you describe that again in detail for the jury?
Okay, they would have belly chains on, which would be a chain that comes around their waist with cuffs on each side of the chain so that their hands would be cuffed close to their body. They would have leg irons on, which would be secured to their ankle parts of their leg, and that would allow them to take steps and walk, but still have them secure.
Were they all required to walk and actually get on the van themselves?
Yes.
If there was an instance where an inmate had to have been carried because of a medical issue onto the van, well, in the first place, would that have happened?
We would not, the people that I've ridden with and that worked with me, we would not carry an inmate to a van.
Why is that?
If they were in such bad condition that they couldn't do that, they didn't need to be on our van and us responsible for them.
Well, would you get in trouble if you didn't return them?
No. We would have the responsibility or the ability to make that decision on our own. If they were in such poor condition, they would probably end up being transported by an ambulance or some other medical vehicle.
With the inmates, I think you indicated there might be some property. How is that property actually transported onto the van?
Well, the property was basically placed in boxes that were probably no more than 12 inches cubed. And if they couldn't fit it in there, it wouldn't go. So they'd have the boxes with their property boxed up in it, and that would be stored in the very back of the van.
Okay, and how did the property boxes get into the van?
The inmates usually carried them out, and then we put them in the van.
So normally you'd have inmates walking with the shackles, carrying their boxes and putting those in the back of the van, and then getting up into the van themselves.
That's correct.
What type of van was this?
It's would be a 16-passenger van that would seat 12 inmates usually, and then the driver and second deputy.
And when they get in the van, are they seat belted in or locked in somehow to the van itself?
The policy was that if they were in a transport van, they did not necessarily have to be seat belted in. Most of the time we told them to seat belt up, and some of them did and some of them didn't.
They would have to step up to get into the van?
Yeah, we had basically a step that would set outside the van. They'd step up on the step and then up into the van and then move to whatever seating location either they were assigned or they wanted to sit in.
Now, do you have any recollection of there ever being a case where an inmate that you transported was unable to actually step up with the shackles on and so forth and get into the van?
Well, there were some that had difficulty doing it, but they were able to do it. If we transported them from Sedgwick County facility to another, if they couldn't actually themselves get up in the van, they were going right back into the Sedgwick County facility.
Now, during the time the inmates are getting into the van, where are you and, I take it there are always two officers during the transport.
Correct.
Where are you and the other officer during the time this is happening?
When we were loading, there'd be one officer, we'd escort them both all out. There'd be an officer at the door where they get up into the van and another officer at the back getting the boxes and stuff loaded into the back of the van. So there was two officers within probably about a 7-foot distance from each other.
Were one or both of the officers always observing what's happening with the inmates that are getting onto the van?
Yes.
More on the leading and suggesting.
Yes.
Was there any way that an inmate could have been carried from the Johnson City facility and placed on the van without being observed by one or both of the officers that are making the transport?
More cost perspective.
There was not any that I've ever witnessed, and where there was always two deputies there, so one or the other of the deputies would have been watching all the inmates boarding the van.
Now, The trip from Johnson City to Wichita, do you have a recollection about how long that took?
Well, considering that in most cases, unless we just specifically went to Johnson City, there was usually at least one, maybe two other stops. So it could have been 5 hours, maybe 4 to 5 hours.
I want you to look a little bit closer at Exhibit 1. I've got some questions about it. So that we have a clear understanding of how this form works. There are some deputies' names up at the top left that are in handwriting. Whose are those names?
Bowman and myself, Hoffman.
Now, were there normally routine partners in this, in the transportation?
Yes.
And was Bowman your normal partner?
No.
If we look at Exhibit 2, does that help you understand how it was that Bowman and your names are on Exhibit 1?
Well, Deputy Kohler was normally my partner. Deputy Bowman's partner was Medina, and Medina, based on this, had training that day. I don't recall why Bowman was necessarily riding with me on that trip, but apparently he was.
Did that happen from time to time, that you'd swap out who were the folks that were doing the transport depending on other commitments that one deputy might have?
Yes.
The form Exhibit 1 is typed up in large measure. Who would have typed that up?
Well, it would be done by one of the detention corporals in the property section.
And how would you and Bowman have come to get a copy of then the form, Exhibit 1?
Well, there's a form provided for the transport deputies, and when we come in there at the beginning of the shift, then this form would be printed up and placed along with any other documents that we're going to on a particular trip, along with the inmate's property in the secured section of the property area.
Help us interpret this form. It's got outbound inmate, and then there are a list of inmates. What does that mean?
Well, outbound inmates are the inmates that are going from Sedgwick County to one of the other facilities.
And then it has money. What does that refer to?
Money is the amount of money that's going out with each individual deputy from their commissary account.
You said deputy, do you mean inmate?
Inmates, I'm sorry.
So you'd said that they would have money with them. Is this in a check form?
When I retired, the only way they would send it out would be in a check. Initially, a year or two before that, it was actually cash money.
So this could have been cash or check. And then would they have had property with them when they left Sedgwick County?
It would have been a boxed property.
And you indicated that there also would have been some pamphlet or package of information regarding medical?
There would have been, normally was a manila envelope that had a sheet on each one of the inmates going out with any kind of medical information that the receiving facility might need.
Okay. And
objection form it would be, and I apologize for the later.
And would there have also have been any medical medicine rather that was provided with the inmate's transport at that time?
If the inmate had medication that they needed to be taking, then it would be sent out with us as well.
On this form it shows a departing and then under that a D-1249. What does the D-1249 stand for?
That would be the property corporal that worked up the trip sheet.
And then there are times that are written or handwritten, and is any of that handwriting concerning outbound inmates your handwriting?
I don't recall offhand. It could have been.
But help me interpret this. The trip out would have started from Wichita. Where would where would the first stop have been?
On this particular trip, the most likely stop, the first stop would have been in Meade County.
And I think maybe when we talked about the counties, we talked about Finney, Grant, and Staton, and maybe overlooked Meade. What city does Meade County?
In Meade,
sit?
Kansas.
Yes. And was Meade also part of the trips that you routinely made back at the time you were working as a transport deputy?
Yes.
There's in the next trip out after the next location after Meade would have been where?
We would have gone from Meade to Grant County, and then to Staton County, and then to Finney County.
Okay, it looks like the time for Finney County is it 10? Oh, that's the time in. Am I reading that correctly?
Oh, right. Time in would be in that one column.
Okay.
So based on this, we would have arrived in Meade County at approximately 8:45 in the morning.
And then the next stop would it have been to Finney County at 10?
On this particular trip, it apparently was, and for whatever reason, I don't know offhand.
In other words, these time in, time out, what does time in refer to? That's the time
That's
you
when
get there?
Correct. When we arrive, time out is when we leave that facility.
And then the receiving, there are a series of initials. Whose initials are those?
Receiving would be the initials of somebody from that particular facility that received the inmates.
Now, focusing on the portion of the form that talks about inbound inmates, how many inmates were transported back according to this form on the date involved?
Looks like 11.
And the first pickup of inmates, where would that have been?
Well, the first pickup would have been in Meade County.
So you would have had some inmates in the van that were riding with you to help pick up other inmates and also drop off some inmates.
Mm-hmm.
What would have been the last stop? I think you indicated Staton was the last stop. Is that right? Okay. When we got to Staton County, according to this form, how many inmates already were in the van?
Well, there would have been 11 in the van at that time.
Oh, you're right. You would have dropped 3 off. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So, and you picked up how many inmates at Staton?
3.
Do you recognize the name or the initials of the officer that received the inmates dropped off at Staton?
I don't recognize them, no.
And then there is, as we talk about inbound, there's a receiving, and it's D1631. What does that stand for?
That, in the receiving area, that stands for the Sedgwick County corporal that received the inmates when we dropped them off back in Sedgwick County.
So this is actually back in Sedgwick County in booking?
And in the property or booking area, yes.
Okay. And the times work out the same. That is to say, if we use Mr. Bruner as the example as an inbound inmate, it shows 11:40 under time in. Do you see what I'm referring to?
Yes.
And what would that have reflected?
Well, the 11:40 is when we arrived at Staton County to switch out the inmates, to drop some off and pick some up.
Okay, and then the time out, the 11:56.
That's when we actually had the inmates on board and were leaving.
So roughly 16 minutes between first arriving to loading the inmates up as you described it and then exiting.
That's correct.
And does this form then show when you got back to Wichita?
No.
There's a date up at the top.
Oh, I guess it is up there. That would have been 1700 hours or 5 p.m.
Okay. There's also information that is filled out on Exhibit 1 talking about regular hours, overtime hours, and other information. Who completes that information?
The transport deputies.
Okay. Any of that you recognize as being your writing?
It doesn't look like it. I'm not sure.
If there's anything that unusual, excuse me, if there's anything unusual that happens during the course of a trip, are there additional reports or forms that deputies that transport inmates are required to complete?
It would kind of depend on the nature of the particular situation. If we had some problems on the van, we would probably write a brief deputy's report in reference to it. Any other things would either be a deputy's report or cutting a case on it, for example, if there was something that involved the necessity to cut an actual case, whether it's criminal or whatever.
If an inmate on the van were to become visibly and noticeably sick, would you, as a transport deputy, have been required to complete some sort of paperwork or notes on that?
We probably would have written a deputy's report, which would detail the incident.
I think you indicated to me you don't have any memory of that ever happening in any of your transports, though. Is that right?
Not like that. There was no medical thing that I recall. You know, there were a couple of other incidents that occurred that we ended up having to write deputies' reports for and stuff, but nothing that I recall that was medical related.
When you get back to Wichita with the inmates, again, walk us through so that we all have kind of a clear mental image of how it works. What happens?
Well, we pull into the Sally Port. One deputy goes to the back of the van where the property is stored.
Can I interrupt you for just a second?
Yes.
What the heck is a Sally Port?
That's the garage entry into the booking area and receiving area. It has doors that open up, drive in, the doors closed, provide a secure area for unloading and loading of the vehicles.
Okay, I interrupt you. Go ahead, please.
One deputy goes to the back of the van to start getting the property available to hand to the inmates so they can carry it in. The other one goes to the door to open up and get ready for the inmates to get off the van, pick up their property from the back, and then walk up to the door to go into the facility itself. And once all the inmates are off, have their property, we'll walk them up to the door, then booking, or I guess master control, opens the door to go into the Sally Port officer's work area. Door shuts, the one to booking is open, and we walk them into the booking area where their property is handed over to booking. We take their restraints off, and then booking takes control of them from that point.
Do you remember an incident or instance where upon arriving in Wichita with inmates that an inmate had to be carried or assisted through the booking process or into the booking area?
Not on any of the trips that I was on.
When did your responsibility then for the inmates that you're transporting end?
Once they were turned over to the booking officers.
No, you retired from the sheriff's office, and why did you retire?
I felt like it was time for me to retire, and my wife and I were wanting to move back down to Texas.
You don't have any continuing relationship with the sheriff's office?
Oh, not really. I talked to one or two of the deputies on occasion, but that's about it.
But you have no financial connection to it?
No.
You moved down to Texas, and when did you come down to Texas?
Bought a house in September of 2009 and actually physically got all moved down here in December of 2009.
How frequently do you get back to Wichita if you do?
Oh, probably 3 or 4 times a year.
And when you do you ever go visit the sheriff's office or the jail?
Haven't so far.
When you were employed at the sheriff's office in connection with transporting inmates, were you ever encouraged, either, well, in any fashion, to transport inmates or to not transport inmates? Well, let me start over again. I think there was interruption there. When you were employed at the sheriff's office and transporting inmates, were you ever encouraged in any fashion to either delay or deny them medical care that they needed?
Objection forms leading suggestive.
Not that I recall.
Well, was there any incident that you can think of where an inmate's medical care was either delayed or denied by a Sedgwick County officer? It was focused on in the transportation of inmates.
Same objection.
Not that I'm aware of.
Did you feel pressured to bring sick inmates back to Sedgwick County who really should have been treated out of county?
Same objection.
Not that I recall.
Well, if there was a written policy, I think you said there was a written policy not to transport inmates who were obviously ill. Was that your previous testimony?
Yes.
Were you ever encouraged by anyone affiliated with the sheriff's office to violate that policy?
Not that I'm aware of.
If, while you were working at the sheriff's office, a transportation deputy violated a written policy, were there consequences to that?
For foundation.
They probably would have had a counseling report written up.
Well, let's just put it this way. Was there any upside that you can think of to, as a transportation deputy, assisting in delaying or denying an inmate medical attention?
For foundation.
I can't see any reason why it would be to the deputy's benefit to do that.
Can you see reasons why it would be contrary to the deputy's interest to do that?
No.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Your Honor, may we approach real quickly?
Yes. All right, Mr. Chalmers?
Your Honor, I believe we've got agreement of counsel, but I would move for the admission of Exhibit 427 and 428. They are log records. 427 is of Paul Navarrete. 428 is a log record of Jay Ewells, along with his transportation records that were referenced in the cross-examination of these two individuals, Your Honor.
No objection.
Wait, what did you say 427 is?
It is a log record for Paul Navarrete, Navarrette, Your Honor. And the other record is for Jay Ewells.
I thought 427 was a letter from Mr. Ewells.
Maybe I've mismarked it. I was trying to mark it after Mr. Ewells. Maybe I should make it 427A, Your Honor, to clarify it.
Can we approach to Your Honor?
Your next witness.
Your Honor, we're going to read. My legal assistant here, Ms. Hutto, is going to play the part of Carol Shepard, and we're going to read portions of Carol Shepard's deposition transcript into the record, Your Honor.
Okay.
So Lisa, if you want to go ahead and sit up there, I appreciate it. Carol, C-A-R-O-L, Shepard, S-H-E-P-P-A-R-D.
So now we're reenacting deposition testimony, right?
We're just trying to make it so that people stay awake.
Okay, so you've had so far written deposition testimony, you've had deposition testimony on videotape, and now we're going to have a reenactment of the deposition. Again, deal with this like you would the testimony of a witness testifying from the witness stand.
Thank you, Your Honor. The deposition of Carol D. Shepard was taken on behalf of the plaintiffs pursuant to the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure before Julie Harrison, a certified court reporter. It gives to her address, and it was done on April 15th of April 2011 at 9 a.m. Mr. Shepard is sworn in, and starting at page 5, line 10, Sir, if you could, give me your full name, please.
Carol D. Shepard.
What is your date of birth, sir?
1/22 of 43.
Are you currently employed?
No, sir, I'm retired.
When were you last employed?
February 2010.
And can you tell me about your educational background?
12th grade, graduated 12th grade.
12th grade, and you received your high school diploma, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was, what, in 1961?
Yes, sir.
And tell me about your employment history. What was your first job after high school?
Canning factory in Hayward, California.
And my understanding is at some point in time you started working for a co-op.
Yes, sir.
When did you start doing that, sir?
August of 1970.
And you remained employed during or through the co-op for what? 31, 32 years?
31 and a half years.
31 and a half years.
Yes, sir.
And during that time, did you work anywhere else?
No, not public. I'd done a little farm work on the weekend or something like that.
And what did you do for this co-op?
Grain elevator operator.
And did you retire from that position?
Yes, sir.
And what year did you retire from the co-op?
2002.
And did you work anywhere else after you retired from the co-op?
I went to work for Staton County Sheriff's Department in February 2002.
And were you hired, or when were you hired?
22nd of February, I think it was.
And you were hired in what job capacity? What was your job title?
Jailer.
Going to page 31. Line 1. Mr. Shepard, when you were fulfilling your job responsibilities on a day-by-day basis at the Staton County Jail, I take it sometimes you are required to fill out reports, make notes, things like that, correct?
The only thing I confirmed was the jail log.
Tell me about the jail log.
Come back and write it down every time we walk through the jail, every hour.
Going on to page 56, line 18. How many times have you contacted Sedgwick County concerning a medical issue on an inmate in the Staton County Jail?
I couldn't confirm how many times.
More than once?
Probably so, because I a lot of times would call for renewing of their meds.
How many times would you have called Sedgwick County on an inmate being housed in Staton County for medical reasons other than to renew a medication?
The only one time, or the only one I can remember, is when I thought they need medical attention.
Page 58, line 6. When you would call Sedgwick County to renew a medication, who would you call?
Medical staff.
You would call the medical staff directly?
Yes.
When you say medical staff, what we're talking about, or what are we talking about? Is it ConMed? Is that a certain office there at Sedgwick County?
ConMed.
And who would you talk to?
I couldn't confirm who all I talked to.
Would it be a doctor, a nurse, a receptionist, if you know?
Nurse.
Do you recall Terry Bruner?
Pardon me?
Do you recall Mr. Terry Bruner?
I remember the name, yes.
Do you recall, you understand that Mr. Bruner was the person that on March 5, 2008, that you felt was ill, and you made a call to Sedgwick County, correct?
Medical staff, yes.
And you understood that Mr. Bruner was incarcerated at the Staton County Jail for a period of several months before that?
Yes.
And you had occasion to see Mr. Bruner on many days while you worked your shift as a jailer over those several months while he was incarcerated there, correct?
Yes.
Do you recall observing Mr. Bruner at any time prior to March 5, 2008?
Not observe him, no.
Do you recall?
Didn't have no reason to that I can recall.
You don't recall ever seeing him, ever talking to him? Before March 5, 2008?
I might have talked to him, but I don't remember what the conversation would have been.
I understand it's possible you may have.
Yes.
But as you sit here today, you certainly have no memory of that.
No.
So if I were to ask you what was his medical condition at any time prior to March 5, 2008, can you tell me?
I couldn't confirm that, no.
What cell was Mr. Bruner located in?
In the dorm.
And do you recall which bed he was assigned to?
He wasn't assigned a bed.
How does that work if an inmate is assigned to the dorm and it has 20 beds, right?
Yes, sir.
How is it determined who goes where?
They determine which bed they want. We didn't appoint a bed.
Do you recall in which bed in the dorm Mr. Bruner was?
On what specific day?
That day.
The day that I called Sedgwick County Medical, he was in the bed next to the bathroom. There's a line of beds here, and there's a wall here, and there's two beds that sets right against the wall.
So he was in the bed closest to the bathroom.
Yes, sir.
Do you recall which other inmates were also in that dorm at that time?
No.
Do you recall there being any unusual incidents in the Staton County Jail during the time that Mr. Bruner was there prior to March 5, 2008?
No.
Down to line 24 on page 61. What does Staton County mean by contraband when they document that in logs?
At the time that Mr. Bruner was here, they were allowed to smoke and chew over at the jail at that time.
Line 9. Was there a period of time when it seemed like there were several inmates who were coming down with maybe the flu or a cold or something?
At the time I called Sedgwick County Med, we had the flu going around.
So on March 5, 2008, when you called Sedgwick County about Mr. Bruner, also at this time the flu was going around the jail, right?
Best of my knowledge, yes.
Other inmates had the flu, correct?
At times, yes, they was.
Which inmates?
That I could not confirm.
And if an inmate, and how did you know other inmates were sick or had the flu? Is this something you observed during your jail checks?
They were complaining about having the flu or...
When you looked at these inmates complaining about having the flu, did they appear to be sick if they did have the flu?
Yes, sir.
Page 64, line 12. So tell me about March 5, that March 5, 2008. Did you, at this first time that you became aware that there was something wrong with Mr. Bruner?
On March 5 of 2008.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I confirmed it by contacting Ted Gibson and the medical staff at Wichita.
Okay, I understand you contacted Sedgwick on March 5, 2008. Right now I'm interested in knowing, what I'm interested in knowing is what happened before that day.
I couldn't confirm.
Why did you call Sedgwick on March 5, 2008?
Why did I call Sedgwick?
Yes, sir.
To confirm that, to get him medical attention.
Why did you think Mr. Bruner needed medical attention on March 5, 2008?
I confirmed that he needed medical attention.
Okay. And how did you do that? I mean, what did you hear or what did you see for you to confirm that he needed medical attention?
Only thing I heard was that he told me that he wasn't feeling good.
When did Mr. Bruner tell you this?
On the 5th.
What time?
I couldn't confirm what time now.
Was this during one of your jail checks?
Yes, sir.
Was this sometime in the morning, right?
I couldn't confirm that.
Do you remember what it was Mr. Bruner told you?
Only thing I can confirm is what I told you there a while ago. He didn't feel good.
Did he say anything else but that?
No, sir.
Did you talk to anyone else about Mr. Bruner's condition?
Gerald and I went back that evening and talked to him and asked him.
Okay, so when you say Gerald and I went back that evening, meaning you first heard Mr. Bruner tell you that he wasn't feeling well, he was sick, right? And then later that evening is when Gerald and you went back to see Mr. Bruner.
Yes.
So how much time are we talking about from the time you first spoke to Mr. Bruner on March 5, 2008 until the time that Gerald and you went back to see Mr. Bruner on that same day? I mean, was it a matter of minutes, hours, what?
I couldn't confirm that.
Do you have any understanding or idea?
No, sir.
Did you talk to any inmates about Mr. Bruner's condition?
At supper chow line, there was inmates that said that he was sick where I got my information.
Was this at supper chow line?
Yes, sir.
Which inmates told you this?
I couldn't confirm his name.
What did they tell you in the chow line?
They said he wasn't feeling good.
Did they give you anything more specific than that?
No, sir.
And then at page 74. Then when you saw Mr. Bruner the evening of the 5th, how did he look?
I couldn't confirm that other than being laying in bed.
You remember him laying in bed?
Just laying on the bed, yes, which they all did.
Did he appear ill?
Yes.
And what about him for you? And what about him for you to think in your mind that this looks like an ill person?
Common sense.
That makes sense. What about Mr. Bruner for your common sense to say this is an ill person?
Because he told me he wasn't feeling good.
Okay, tell me this. What did you observe for him to have this ill appearance?
I don't recall what I observed that night.
Did he seem to be hot with fever?
I couldn't tell you that either.
When you went to observe Mr. Bruner that evening, Mr. Nichols was with you as well.
Yes.
Mr. Nichols is another jailer in Staton County, correct?
Yes.
And why were you and Mr. Nichols in there to see Mr. Bruner?
I don't know why both of us was in there. We just went back to observe him.
Mr. Bruner did go through the chow lines. Do you remember seeing Mr. Bruner in the chow lines?
Before, yes.
Do you remember seeing Mr. Bruner in the chow line that day?
I couldn't confirm that.
Can you confirm seeing Mr. Bruner in the chow line the day before March 4?
Not definitely yes, but with the head count and everything.
Tell me everything else you recall Mr. Bruner telling you about his condition.
I don't confirm that. I don't remember.
Do you think that most likely what you did?
I asked him, probably asked him how he felt, yes.
And your recollection and his response to that?
Didn't feel good.
Did you ask him what doesn't feel good? Anything like that?
I don't remember for sure.
What do you recall what Mr. Nichols said about Mr. Bruner?
No, I don't confirm what Mr. Nichols said.
How long do you think you were in there talking to Mr. Bruner?
I couldn't confirm the time.
A minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
I won't speculate because I don't remember.
So is it possible that when you made these observations of Mr. Bruner and that heard he was sick, this really happened the day before on March 4 because you didn't talk to Mr. Bruner about his medical condition until the evening, correct?
Yes.
And then the next morning, the two of you decided we're going to call Ted Gibson.
Yes.
And that's indeed what you did. You called Ted Gibson on the morning of March 5 at 2008, right?
Yes.
Why did you call Ted Gibson?
See if he had room on the transport. He was the transport officer at the time.
So Ted Gibson is a transport officer. He's not a medical person, right?
No, sir.
And for the first time you decided to do
And the first thing you decided to do was call the transport person at Sedgwick, right?
Yes.
And you told him he was, it says right here in your statement, we decided the morning of March 5 to call Ted Gibson and advise him of the situation. Why did you advise Mr. Gibson of the situation?
I advised him that he needed medical attention.
At page 83, line 12. Okay, you would agree with me that when you called Mr. Gibson that morning, you told him that Mr. Bruner needed immediate medical attention, correct?
Medical attention, yes.
You told him that Mr. Bruner needed immediate medical attention, correct?
Medical attention.
Line 90, or page 94, line 21. I would imagine that when you reviewed the typewritten statement, you wanted to make sure that it accurately reflected your handwritten statement, correct?
I couldn't confirm that, no.
But while you would agree with me if you were to have noticed anything in this typewritten statement that was different from your handwritten statement, you would have told the dispatcher to change it, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Shepard, what is your understanding as to what the word immediate means?
I don't understand what you are talking about.
I mean, you're familiar with the word immediate, right? Go ahead.
Yes.
What does it mean to you?
Attention, as far as I know.
Pardon me?
Right? Attention.
Page 99. Line 4. Yes, according to your statement to Mr. Gibson, according to your statement, Mr. Gibson told you to call Sedgwick Medical Department and ask them to get him on the next transport. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is that your recollection as to what Mr. Gibson told you on the telephone during this conversation?
Yes.
Anything else you recall Mr. Gibson saying to you during this telephone conversation other than in Exhibit 22, which is his statement?
Not that I recall.
And did you then call the medical department and ask them to place Mr. Bruner on the next transport?
Rephrase that now.
Sure. After you had discussions with Mr. Gibson that we just talked about on March 5, 2008, after Mr. Gibson tells you to call the medical department and ask them to place Mr. Bruner on the next transport, did you call the medical department after that?
Yes.
Did you call them right away after you had this conversation with Mr. Gibson, or was it sometime later?
Right away.
And you called Sedgwick Medical. Did you recall who you spoke to?
It says Joyce, but I couldn't confirm that right now, but...
Okay, and you would have told Joyce that you needed to place an inmate on the next transport, correct?
I told her that I had an inmate that needed medical attention.
You told that to Joyce?
Yes.
And who is Joyce?
Which Joyce?
Yeah, who is she?
I couldn't tell you that. A nurse at Wichita. I don't know what her last name is.
Did you tell her anything about Mr. Bruner other than he needed medical attention?
Medical attention.
Did you tell her anything that was wrong with him?
No.
Did you tell her whether he was urgent, emergent, routine, anything like that?
No.
And do you recall what Joyce said to you? Line 16.
We would get him back for medical attention.
And your statement says she advised that she would give him transportation back ASAP, correct?
And I could not confirm.
Page 102, line 23. Then it says here, after you spoke to Joyce, you then called Ted Gibson back. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And tell me what you recall about that discussion.
That it was okay for him to come back, get medical attention, and we would have him on the bus going back.
Page 104, line 4. Any other conversations or discussions with anyone from Sedgwick County concerning Mr. Bruner other than what we have already discussed?
Not that I can confirm of, no.
Do you recall having any conversations, any other conversations or discussion with Mr. Bruner other than what we've discussed?
No.
Do you recall Mr. Bruner ever asking for a doctor?
No.
If Mr. Bruner were to ask for a doctor, would you have made it sure that he was seen by a doctor?
I would have had it okayed through the sheriff, Ed Bizona, and then went from there.
And if an inmate at Staton County Jail needs medical treatment, where in Staton County do they go for medical treatment?
To our local doctor,
Who is that?
Dr. Bill Troop,
And
at
where-
this time.
And where is his office, or where was his office at the time?
On Main Street up here.
Is he part of a clinic, or has he his own private office?
That I could not tell you for sure. It is a clinic, but he's at the hospital too.
And sometimes inmates are taken to the hospital, correct?
In case of emergency, yes.
Page 106, line 5. What is your understanding as to when Mr. Bruner was transported back to Sedgwick County?
Repeat that, please.
What is your understanding as to when Mr. Bruner was sent to Sedgwick?
When Mr. Bruner was sent back
To Sedgwick.
to Sedgwick on March 6 is my recall.
You weren't working on March 6.
Yes, I was working March 6.
Do you recall what his condition was on March 6? Was he the same? Was he better? Was he worse?
I don't think he was any worse. I couldn't confirm, though, for sure. He got up and walked out.
109. And if you really felt that Mr. Bruner needed to be seen right away by a doctor or a hospital, you could have made arrangements for Mr. Bruner to be seen by the doctor here in Staton or at the Staton County Hospital, correct?
Yes.
And that concludes the reading of this portion of the deposition, Your Honor. My next witness is available at 1, Your Honor. I don't know what you prefer to do.
Okay, well, we can take our lunch and recess now, and we'll be back at 1 o'clock ready to go. Court is in recess.
All rise. Court is now in recess.